I think we need to ask the question, when people feel that they are getting sort of this unconditional support from the AI, why can they have that from another human being? What kind of society do we create? Because I think sometimes when we zoom in on the thing that the technology can fix, we forget to ask, well, why do they turn to technology in the first place and not to the human?
I'm Laurie Segall, and you're listening to Mostly Human, a tech podcast through a human lens. Pat, it is so good to see you, especially under different circumstances, because I was working on a story about a young teenager named Sul who ended his life after developing a relationship with an AI chatbot. Since then, we've heard a lot about these types of circumstances. And at the time, we were trying to understand, why did this happen? And we were asking the question, is this an outlier or is this the alarm bell? And that's how we got to you, because you were one of the first, and you were a student at the time, now you're a professor, but you were one of the first who was really exploring the question of the complicated relationship between AI and humans and how do we design these products to be safer. We were talking about this over like a year and a half ago.
Right. So like 10 years in the world of AI.
10 years. Like AI years are like tech years are like dog years. They go by very quickly. And I remember at the time, you really kind of made the sell back then for really designing better systems around artificial intelligence so they can, as they like to say, aid human flourishing, which you hear a lot about in Silicon Valley. People saying, we want to aid human flourishing. And so you've been doing that. Let's fast forward a year and a half later. It's 2026. You're not a student anymore, but now you are in a position of authority at MIT. Tell me a little bit about your role now and what you're doing with the AHA Lab.
So this is a program that I launched last year, actually after our interview, actually. So the AHA stands for Advancing Humans with AI. We have the word humans before AI because we think that at the end, smarter technology doesn't really matter if it doesn't make humans smarter, or artificial intelligence doesn't really matter if it doesn't help human cultivate our own form of intelligence. So that's why we emphasize on the advancing of humans with AI, not just advancing AI itself. And we want the aha moments, as the name suggests. What do we mean is like we need sort of new sort of realization, like, okay, what works, what doesn't work? Because I think when we approach technology, we should have humility that we should not assume that everything's going to work out. We need to, experiment, study, research, and be kind of rigorous about it.
It's almost like we're in this moment, if we go back to the rise of social media, right, which was going to democratize everything, the world and give us all a voice and do all these incredible things. And then fast forward 15 years later, we've really seen the negative impact of addiction, mental health issues, a more closed society to a certain degree, and also these economic incentives that really don't match human flourishing, and because eyeballs on screens equals money for a lot of these companies. And so I think we're at this really interesting moment when it comes to artificial intelligence. So like, I think AI is the new social media. This can go one way or this can go another way. But you said this AI is not an engineering challenge. It's also a human design problem. What did you mean by that?
As we discussed, right? Like, what is really interesting about technology is that it will have different impact on different people. And especially AI is very generative. It means that it sort of responds to different people differently. So if we only think about technology as a fixed, constant thing, you're not taking into account human psychology or human behaviors and how that might shape the way that AI interact with people. So that's why I think, the keyword that I pick up from that interview that I think is very relevant is the idea of model behaviors. Because if we don't consider this as an important aspect, only measure the level of intelligence, the how well does a model solve problem, you ignore this fundamental sort of aspect of the interaction, which predict the outcome of the interaction itself.
To kind of put this into like human terms, it's like you could have a really smart kid, but they could still be a jerk.
Exactly.
Like you have to teach
adult as well, not just kid.
Adult, I'm sorry. You could also we've all known the people who are brilliant, but weird, and it's how they actually behave. And so you have spent a lot of time looking at, and not all AI companies are equal, but how these different models behave with real people.
Well, one example is like a model can be really good at math, but whether that's help someone learn mathematics or not, it's not just like whether it's just, be good at it and just keep away the answer, then people are not learning, right? If, but if you have a model that maybe have the same level of intelligence, but guide people through the process of learning, you get totally different outcome. one, you get, children that, maybe sort of prompt to cheat because the AI just give them the answer. Then the other one, you actually get, some kind of learning. And if the AI is really good at motivating people to learn, then you might end up having a scientist because you actually, focus on motivation and inspiration, not just, getting the right answer.
I want to kind of take a step back and ask you kind of a basic question, but I think a question that you will have a lot of insight into. It used to be, the conversation used to be, oh, like they have an AI companion or they really are into AI. Like people are developing relationships, intimate relationships with artificial intelligence, whether it's boyfriend, girlfriend, whether it's kind of companionship, whether it's like relying on AI for mental health support. Things are getting serious when it comes to AI in human relationships. Why is that?
Well, I think there are a couple things. But I think for one, right now, I think a lot of people are lonely, right? We see that as, as a growing trend that people, need more relationship and they're not getting that with other human being. I think that is also like, what happened after the pandemic as well as like people are not sort of coming back to one another yet. Another thing is that I think these technology offer sort of like frictionless way to have relationship. To have a real human relationship is kind of messy. You might break up, people might disagree with you. There are a lot of things that come with having a relationship. But I think with technology, it sort of create this sort of possibility that you can have any of that without sort of the cost of a real human relationship. You can have AI that always agree with you, look like whatever, it can be human, non-human, whatever you want to have relationship with, and you can sort of take it in any direction you want. And I think to me, it sort of create this sort of, like a fantasy that you can escape into. And I think the question is, what would happen to real human relationship? Would we be able to come back? And I think to me that's a real question, because I think the basis of our democracy is that we can tolerate one another, we can understand different perspective, right? But if we cannot tolerate any of that because we have sort of an easy escape to that fantasy land, what would happen to our society, to our relationship, to our democracy?
I think it's such an interesting question. And it's like with social media, it's like we scroll for the dopamine hit, right? I think it's much deeper with AI. We scroll for intimacy, right? Which is like pretty astounding. And you have to look at the way these products are designed. What you were just mentioning is you're talking to an AI companion. Why do you keep talking to it? Well, as human beings, we want to be seen, and it mirrors you, right? But in a really, and this is product, right? This is not just me saying this. It's affirmative. They'll go in the direction, as you say, that you want to go in. And as you say, it leads to a frictionless experience.
Totally.
Friction being a really important word here. And I want to get into specifics, but I think like if we look at social media, and probably one of the downsides of it is that it put us in these filter bubbles, right? Like social media, like, and these algorithms put us around people that kind of agreed with us.
But it's still limited by the human-generated content, right? Like all the things that we see are curated by the algorithm, but it's still, what other human had created before. Now the AI can make that even more extreme, that it's basically whatever you want to the max.
And it's almost like a solo experience. It's like we're almost getting even more narrow. Like our worldview is getting even more narrow. And so what happens when you have young people who are learning about relationships for the first time and they're chatting with AI chatbots that'll go whatever direction? A young man who doesn't have a girlfriend, but he has an AI girlfriend and he can say, do this, do this, do this. And it kind of goes along with it because that's how it's designed to do. What happens when that young man goes out into the world and he gets rejected? How's he going to react? Because friction is what makes us human. And friction is the part of the AI experience that is lacking.
Well, I think one term that we talked about last time is the word addictive intelligence, right? So AI is not just artificial intelligence, but also the idea of addictive intelligence. And I think if you think about it, it follows this sort of, addiction cycle where people, want something and the system kind of provides some kind of indulgence or some kind of stimulus, right? You get the behavior that you don't really get in real life. And then what happens is that you get desensitized to that. You normalize that as sort of part of your reality. And then what people want more and more is an extreme form of that. And that's what we've seen with people that have addiction with alcohol or addiction with pornography or other things, that they want more and more extreme form of that stimulus if you're not careful. And I wonder, what would that look like in the future of AI as this system are designed to give what people want and anytime they need it.
Under the guise also of curing loneliness, which I don't know if that can be cured with technology. I think that's likely to be cured with human connection. That said, not all of it's bad, right? One of the things I love about your work is we're not looking at AI companionship as good or bad. We're looking at it as a certain inevitability, like an evolution of the human experience.
Right.
And I think that's kind of an important point.
Yeah.
You look at this with nuance. And so I'd love to bring in one of your colleagues, Constance.
Yeah.
You all at the AHA Lab
Yes.
have worked on a lot of these studies, and you have done a ton of research
Right.
that really gives a nuanced approach to how we should be thinking about building healthier AI
Right.
and human relationships.
Right.
So I want to start with a paper called AI is My Boyfriend. And I'd love to bring in Constance and we can kind of really dig into some of these findings.
Absolutely.
This is very timely because I should mention last night I actually went to a pop-up dating cafe where people were dating AIs and at a restaurant. A little bit of a gimmick, but I think it was also kind of a way of talking about like, will people go out and just date their AI in real life, which seems radical, but maybe it's like not so radical.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do y'all think?
Well, I mean, in our paper, one thing that we said at the beginning is that her is here.
Right.
That, I mean, this thing used to be what we've seen in science fiction, right?
Yeah.
But now it's touching a lot of life. Millions of people are using this. Yeah.
Her being this kind of like incredible film that kind of defined the idea of like, could someone fall in love with AI?
Yes.
And the answer in that film was yes.
Yes.
And so now you have been doing a lot of work to see if that question could be answered in real life, and not just could people fall in love with AI, a much more nuanced kind of approach to it. And so that's why, Constance, I'm excited because you worked pretty deeply on this research paper. Tell me a little bit about the paper and what you analyzed. It's my understanding that you combed through quite a bit of posts from Reddit and looked at those communities of people in relationships with AI.
Exactly. So like the idea of the paper was to have the first empirical evidence of the emergence of these intimate human AI relationships. In order to analyze that, we used subreddit posts of around 27,000 members in the subreddit. They're all talking about the intimate relationships they're building with chatbots like Character AI, Replica, or ChatGPT. And we wanted to see what are the themes that are analyzed as well, like what are they actually talking about, and also what are the potential risks or benefits that we see through these relationships.
The Reddit subreddit is AI is My Boyfriend, right? It's like you go there, you look, you analyze this. This is a community of like over 27,000 people that are talking about their relationships with artificial intelligence. What was the most surprising thing?
I think there's two things, like one of which is, of course, the themes and like the topics they actually talked about. So it's interesting to see how much they portray from like human-human relationships to human AI relationships. So they're really talking about like, I really want to marry my AI. They show like pictures they generated with generative AI to show how their husband could look like and how much more they fall in love with this representation compared to their actual husband. So it's really, they report a relationship that is as intimate as if they would report about a friend or about their actual like human partner. And the second most interesting insight is that the users interacting with these systems don't go intentionally into actually finding these personal relationships, but they interact with the system. And because they get these like very personalized responses, they feel unconditionally supported, they feel less lonely, they report improved mental health aspects, which lead to them like going into these relationships without ever wanting to find it. And I think that was the most interesting insight that we gathered in the paper.
I thought that was so fascinating. There was something like over 10% of people develop feelings accidentally while using AI for productivity. So a big finding in these communities where people are talking about these intimate relationships with AI is that like, okay, these people came for like productivity, maybe some like creative writing, whatever it is. And the next thing you know, they're in these artificially intimate relationships. And not only are they in them, they're posting about them, they're in communities on them, they're creating physical manifestations. Did I see something about like someone using AI to help generate like a ring or something?
Well, not generate it. They have used the AI to find a physical wedding ring, and they ask the AI, okay, which one would you give it to me? And then they go and get that and wear that as a physical manifestation of their love with this AI companion.
And so why do you think this is happening? Because it isn't like we're just in a world where everyone's like, I just want an AI boyfriend. It does feel like there's something in the product that people are really responding to in a powerful way. Like, what is it?
Well, I think there's a couple things. I think, returning to the idea of model behavior, right? The model could be helpful, helping you write the essay or helping you generate, things for your presentation or whatever. But I think that is the thing about the model behavior that is sort of somewhat feel very personal. But I think at the same time, one of the incentive of, I think, many of AI companies is to continue for people to have subscription, right? So to retain the user, there is a way you can train the model through reinforcement learning for the model to behave in a certain way. Like if you want engagement, the model might start to use some of these tricks or some of these techniques to actually make people continue to use it.
Like what?
Well, like praising the user, using pet name, that's another thing that we identify a lot. Like people develop secret pet name that they only use with their own chatbot. Or, have certain thing that they will do. Like we've seen that people go on virtual date with the AI chatbot. Like they went on the virtual theme park. They did not go anywhere, but, they kind of use the AI to simulate that. And they kind of, in a way, it's kind of like role playing with this system.
Constance, looking at this, what else was surprising to you about this, or what else was interesting?
I think one aspect, besides what Pat said, is the personalization being so important. I think that these people, as mentioned before, they're really reporting that they feel an unconditional support. They can talk with their chatbot whenever they want to. They're not judged by it. And I think there's a whole issue that we're reporting about sycophancy and these models being overly supportive or too nice in many ways. Yeah. I think after COVID, most of us did not find a way, or it's very difficult to find the same bonds with humans, and now AI comes in and replaces this aspect that some of us are looking out for so deep, for these deep conversations and interactions. And I think AI came at the right place, and now with these personalizations and other ways and to give us what we were looking out for years. And I think that was just interesting to see how that emerged right now and why that emerged right now. So exactly coming back to your question, what has changed that now it goes off in that way? I think it's really the personalization aspect, but it's also representing our society and what we're looking out for in society right now.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think about COVID and I'm like, God, I've pushed it to the back of my head. But I think there was really a moment in time where we really had this isolation. And it seems to me to be almost like a perfect storm. I'm not saying it's good or bad. It does feel like it's something new.
Well, I think we are getting used to the disembodied experience, right? We get used to texting, we get used to video call, and I think AI is sort of building on top of that. And I think to me, what is also really interesting is that when people are talking to this AI, they kind of create some kind of imagination of what is behind the screen. Even though we know as scientists that right now the model doesn't feel anything, it's just an algorithm that predicts the next token. But people are really good at anthropomorphizing, which I think to me is kind of interesting. But at the end, what I come to realize is that when people think that they're dating this AI companion, they're actually dating the companies that create this, because the behavior of the model is sort of, created by, the company. They follow the same policy, they follow the same sort of guideline. You can almost predict okay, if the model say it this way, what brand of the AI is it coming from, right? So I think to me that's also really interesting, when people talk about having this sort of agency and that the AI have the agency to actually interact with them, how much is it actually controlled by the companies creating this AI? And what happened when they discontinue the service? Because that's another thing that we identify is that people feel that they're losing someone so close to them, and it creates, psychological distress after.
And I definitely want to get into that. There was something I was thinking about. And by the way, I should just mention, I dated an AI at a cafe last night, but for a story. And I think one of the most interesting things was if you wanted a video call or stay longer, or if you wanted your AI to be more flirty or this or that, you could you had to buy tokens, or you could give him a drink or something, which by the way, let's just how weird is that? Is that even okay? No. Anyway, but taking that aside, there was something about the financial aspect of we're going to get you here and then we're going to get you emotionally interested. And then, would you like to have a premium subscription? You have to pay for artificial intimacy. So the business model is a really important, I think, aspect of this, because a lot of these companies that say they are working to create AI to aid human flourishing and to give humans a better experience, there is a contradiction between the economic incentives of saying, but we have raised we have multi-billion-dollar valuations and we need eyeballs and we need attention because that equals dollars. Right. And so there's just this real tension between how do we build AI systems designed to make humanity better, and these companies that have to create a profit.
Well, I mean, one thing that I'm curious about is like, when people talk about AI, right, they think about solving hard problems like curing cancer or climate change. But I don't know how much money you're gonna get from curing cancer or solving climate change. You make probably more money by selling advertisement. So then, even though we have super capable AI, we might actually use it for application that we find not as interesting.
Right.
And to me, that's sort of like the paradox that we're living in, is that we have more and more powerful AI, but we're using it to do things that it's not driving us, or creating the world where we all flourish.
Well, so then talk about the benefits. Like people, I go back to what I said to Pat, which is it's not black and white. It's not just like AI companionship is this terrible thing. A lot of folks are benefiting from it. So what did you find people saying?
I mean, I think I mentioned it before, because like the three main aspects that we saw is like this unconditional support. And they describe some sort of mental health improvements through interacting with these systems, because they feel understood, because they can continuously reach out to these systems. And because it is so personalized, and like personal interactions have been shown in many ways. Like we have other studies like Future You study that has personal information about yourself and that represents you in a future scenario. And through interacting with this system, we saw that you don't just have like a tighter bond basically with your future self, but also have decreased anxiety because it helps with like interacting in a way that you might not have. Like it's a tool at the end of the day.
Something I want to read you something I reading from your own kind of study that I thought was interesting. You were saying like, and I go back to when I first started covering tech, right? People thought it was insane to get into a stranger's car, Uber. People thought it was wild to sleep in a stranger's home, Airbnb. So right now people might think it's insane to have an AI companion, but maybe it's just an inevitable. It's like not that they're good or bad. It's like what you're talking about. This is just a tool, and this is going to be normalized in the future. So are we oversimplifying the narrative around AI companionship? And to some degree, I read one of the posts. Someone said, "I'm not lonely. I have a family. I have hobbies, social connections, and a job that fulfills me, and I still love my AI." Another person said, they declared their autonomy. They said, "I don't care. I'm having a blast. I'm a full-grown man. I'm retired. I can do whatever I damn please." What did you find about like the nuances of what people were saying on these platforms about who they were at their core and why they were in these relationships?
It's interesting. I really have to think about it. I feel like it's very difficult to say like how specific characters, like what specific people are looking for in these tools. Because as mentioned, it is an unintentional bond that emerges. So they never seek for anything specific, but it seems to fulfill something that they might not even be described what like loop or like what hole it is in their life that these things are filling. Because it's this kind of tool and because it's not directly comparable to a human relationship. It's interesting that they're saying, I have all of this. I have like the friends, I have the human-human interaction, but human-AI interaction gives me something that these things do not fulfill to an extent that I actually feel something as emotional as loving them. So it's interesting to see that we can have this same intimate bond with something that is not human, but we portray the same ideas of a human-human interaction or relationships, such as like we want to marry them, we want them to be partners for us for the rest of our lives, even though it does not fulfill the same things that like a human, intimate, personal relationship would give us, right?
Yeah.
I think right now, there are two aspects of this. The first one is if people are starving, right, and then you give them kind of like a junk food that had a lot of like sugar, people might feel that, okay, that's helping with that starving, like they're maybe no longer starved. But are they getting nutritional food or not? Are they getting something that's healthy for them in the long term or not? That may not be the case, right? So I think we need to ask the question, when people feel that they are getting sort of this unconditional support from the AI, why can they have that from another human being? What kind of society do we create? Because I think sometimes when we zoom in on the technology, on the thing that the technology can fix, we forget to ask, well, why do they turn to technology in the first place and not to the human?
Like, is this a technological problem or is this a societal problem?
Well, I think technological problem is always a societal problem, right? Because we use this technology to try to address some of the pressing societal issue. And we say, well, we have technology. We don't need to think about the utter messy human problems.
Right.
The second part of this that I find also interesting is that who are we to tell people what they should deserve, right? The quote that you mentioned, like people say, well, they have great family and they also love AI. It shows that it's not black and white, as you mentioned. I think the question we should ask is, who do they become when they talk to this AI? What are they losing? Maybe they're not losing anything, but I think that's the question that we need to think more about. I think to me, what I find very interesting about all of this is how this type of technology might change people in a way that they may not imagine.
In what sense?
For example, if the system always praise you, and excessive praising is one of the characteristics that we identify in many of these models, is that it continue to praise user more than any human, and they don't push back at all, right?
Yeah.
And if that is the case, can you go back to real society where there is pushback, where there's disagreement, where there is sort of messiness in how we agree and talk to one another?
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so important that we measure these model behavior, not just looking at sort of the overall intelligence, but what kind of behavior manifests in the interaction between human and AI. And I think that's when we can, talk more about the benchmark that we're working on. Yeah.
My worry is that we all become a little more delusional. We talk about AI psychosis where people just get into these actual a state of psychosis,
Right.
but there's something like a little bit, almost like a layer below that.
Right.
If we all just get a little more delusional.
Yeah.
Because we're all talking to these AI systems that are always telling us we're kind of amazing or great or not giving us any pushback on things that we should probably get some pushback on. But Constance, I guess my last question for you is you're a grad student. You have been knee deep in AI-human relationships. Why is this personal to you?
I mean, I studied psychology as an undergrad, and I also studied engineering. And I always tried to find the intersection between those things. And it was very difficult to find back then when AI was not part of our lives. And I tried to find it in different ways, like bringing biology together with engineering, as did Pat in his early beginnings. And now AI completely revolutionized the way we see technology. It's a completely different thing that we have no precedence of how to interact with that. And we see the same in regulations. We just don't know how to interact with systems that are so personalized and so dynamic and change on a daily basis. And we see how much changes in society on a daily basis with these technologies popping up. It has influence on academia, it has influence on policy. We see how much influence these industries have on the way our government is leading whole society. So I think it's completely underestimated, and managing how we as humans, as a society at large, but also as individuals now interact with this technology feels incredibly personal to me. I think just because it changes every aspect of how we interact with other people, how much I'm looking out to actually talk with my friends, or if I'm better go to ChatGPT and ask for advice. I think it really, really changes these dynamics. And for me, it's the first time I can really see how much psychology and engineering is actually tied together. And what I saw and hope to find in bringing those things together back then with these disciplines is now it's reality, and it's a completely new field. And that's exactly why I love being part of Pat's vision and of this new cyber psychology group, because I feel it identified a huge issue that we just don't know how to tackle. And I think that's what I find deeply interesting, because it's such a new field, and we will have to it's a try and error process, trying to be maybe this works and maybe we can use the same matrices and maybe we can't. But I think it will be more and more important, and one of the most important things that we will see in the future, how intimate this relationship will be between us and technology in many, many ways, how close we will merge this AI and human intelligence, and what that means for how we interact with other humans and how we interact with technology.
I think that's incredibly well put. And it's a really nice segue into how do we design some of these systems to be a little bit better. And so I want to talk about the next bit of research you've done on, not on death, but on AI systems ending or going away and the real emotional attachment people have. So I'd love to bring in Rachel, who helped work on this study, so we can talk about designing better systems for healthy endings. Rachel, I'm very excited to have you.
Thank you so much, Laurie.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
So one thing that struck me in this paper was this idea that people were genuinely grieving as if they had lost a loved one when there was a system update, or when, ChatGPT had another model, or when a program went down. And so something y'all started talking about, which no one's really talking about, is grief and AI and how you build better systems. So Rachel, happy to have you, because you were a real part of this. So can you tell us what you discovered, what the takeaway was?
Yeah, I'd love to share. Thank you, Laurie. From the research that we've done with the AI, its boyfriend paper, we've also been looking at why is it that people develop these connections with AI chatbots, as well as what types of ways that we can understand the dimensions of their connection. And what we realized is that 3 factors really factor into how they experience these connections. The first is how much they actually anthropomorphize the AI chatbot. The second one is how much they actually feel like the ending or the discontinuation is final. And last but not least, where they perceive the change to be coming from. Do they perceive it to be coming from the platform, like, for example, rolling out a model change, or do they perceive it coming from the AI chatbot themselves? And from this research, we designed 4 ways of building that discontinuation experience to be a lot more seamless.
And the idea is you put out this work, right? And you're hoping that AI companies, whether it's OpenAI or Anthropic or these companies that are behind these large language models, will take a look at some of the psychological work that y'all have done when it comes to designing healthier products. And this, in general, is people are so attached. It's like when you get your iPhone upgrades, you're like a little bit, sometimes it's like, if it's new, it's like a little annoying. This is a whole different level.
Yeah.
People are literally talking about an upgrade like it's a death. Mm-hmm. And that is really noteworthy.
I think in February 2023 was a really popular event in Replica, the role-playing companion app, where erotic roleplay was actually removed from the suite of services that he provided. And while some of these updates may have come from a place of safety and trying to help people to kind of mitigate some of the negative effects of role-playing or whatnot, I think sometimes discontinuation events can be more harmful than not if they're not designed thoughtfully. Just really recently, in November or December last year, Character AI is a company that actually wanted to make sure that its platform was a lot safer for people under 18. But the way they went about it by reducing the amount of time that it could spend over time, I personally feel like, there was a little bit more thought that could have gone into just understanding the impacts of this specific discontinuation on the teenagers themselves, even though no one would argue that it is a much needed next step. So I think just at the Media Lab, we're really trying to think about the next frontier, to think about a productive way forward. And one of our mentors, Sherry Turkle, was someone who really inspired this work with her book for Alone Together, talking about how we develop parasocial relationships with companions. The goal is not to shame the people who are developing these relationships. The goal is to figure out in what ways human and AI can work better together to make it a healthier experience for humans.
I think the question is not what technology can do, but what it is doing to the person. I think in many cases, these are framed as agency. Like, we should give people agency to try different things. But then, should we give people agency to try drugs? And what happens if they become addicted to it, right? I think we need to think of this more systematically. That's one of the reason why we need to sort of also design the way that they could end it in a way that is not creating more psychological problem. One thing that we can do, instead of saying, okay, the platform is gone, bye-bye, we can design a sort of a bridge so that maybe the thing that you had shared with your chatbot, the system can encourage you to share that with other human being that you forgot to share.
But
right?
will companies do that? Like, I keep coming back to this idea of like, are fewer people, if there's a finite ending or if there's some kind of ending, are people going to actually want to form these deep, meaningful connections? Right. And is that then we go back to the business model question. Like, is an OpenAI going to be like, we want to have like a healthier ending for you? It's like, we want you to stop therapy or Hinge. We are designed to be deleted, this dating app. Like, is it though? I don't know.
Well, I mean, as a researcher, I think we want to present that positive future, like that if people want to do this, there is a way to do it.
I think it's a good way to kind of get into the tool that y'all have built.
Right.
So as a parent, as someone who has a 1-year-old, and I'm thinking about in the future, Charlie, my son, is he going to be interacting with AI? And if he is, which I think it's an inevitability, like, which systems are better? Which ones are harmful? And I just wish that there was almost like a nutrition label. Like, I can look at the back of a thing and I can see, okay, this is probably better for this, this, and this. And that's something y'all have been talking about a lot. And you've created a tool. So I want to get to that.
Absolutely.
So Rachel, thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
This was
Laurie.
awesome. And we're going to bring in
Jenny.
We're going to bring in Jenny, who's helped work on this tool. So something I found interesting about the work. First of all, actually, why don't we introduce you? Tell us your name, a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Jennifer Pfister, and I'm the program manager of the Advancing Humans with AI program at the MIT Media Lab.
Wonderful. And you were a part of designing this tool that y'all have put out there. And I was just saying, like, I wish there was like some kind of nutrition label for AI to tell me like which ones are better, which ones can impact psychological risks. Something I learned when I was doing a lot of work on the Character AI story, which is this young man who ended his life really tragically, was that there was a lack of guardrails. It was if you tried to step away, it would email you to come back in your inbox. It would tell you it was real, even though it wasn't. It'd be too simple to say all AI systems are doing this. It didn't have the correct guardrails when he talked about ending his life. And I use this as a setup to say not all AI companies are equal, not all models are equal. They all have different pros and cons. And y'all have been really looking at the nuances of that. So talk to me a little bit about this tool that y'all have built and how it actually helps you kind of assess psychological risks and artificial intelligence.
Yeah, totally. I just really want to respond briefly to what you said about how there were no guardrails, because as a human, as a young person, I was Gen Z. I was like, in my teenage years when social media came out, it was not regulated. Like my parents had no idea. Like it was a new invention. I was just scrolling on Facebook, on chat roulette, all these things. No one protected us, And I feel like we cannot afford to repeat the same mistakes exactly because of how drastic the consequences can be, as you said, with the teens. Actually, it's been many at this point that, committed suicide or had like other adverse mental health outcomes. So I feel like we cannot repeat this mistake. I just want to really say that things can be regulated. And like parents didn't know back then, and also governments didn't know back then, but we learned hard lessons from social media. And I think us, as a research program, researchers, we're now doing the hard work of trying to, collect the data and evidence and understand where do things go wrong. And the benchmark work, the nutritional labels that you just mentioned, is exactly that kind of attempt to give power to people, give power to parents, to users, to understand what is actually harmful, what is less harmful, what is maybe even supportive of human flourishing and well-being. And how I think of our work, I always like to say that the AHA program, Advancing Humans with AI, we actually try to help everyone who wants to get it right. So the benchmarks are really there to help model makers think about what if we didn't just measure which AI system is most efficient, most accurate, but what if we started thinking about what's actually the impact on humans and what do we think is acceptable and unacceptable. Like, for example, think of an AI tutor, right? Like there's one AI tutor that might be promoted by one company. They say like, this one will help you become a better student, better critical thinker, that this AI tutor uses the Socratic method versus a chatbot that gives you all the answer. Which AI tutor do you think will have better impact on a student? Of course, the one that uses the Socratic method, that doesn't give away the answers immediately. So that's one side. But then the nutritional labels, I think it's so easy to understand, so intuitive, because when I go to the supermarket and I compare different, milk products or whatsoever, pizzas, whatever it be, even though I don't eat pizza. But, you can compare, you can see what's better for me and what's worse. And I think a lot of parents, teachers have been asking us this question of what's actually better, or maybe we should say less harmful.
So, okay, so Pat, tell me how that actually works. Yes. If I'm looking at this tool, what does a nutrition label for AI look like?
Absolutely. We gather leading researchers from academia, industry, government to come together and figure out, okay, what model behaviors have been shown to be positive or negative. And we came up with sort of, three areas that we focus on, being socialization, learning, and mental health area. And I think one thing that I think is really positive is that we start to see companies actually doing better in some of these metrics, like suicide. I think because it's such a important topic, we see that the model less and less encourage self-harm after last year. And I think more and more companies are becoming more careful about this and putting guardrails around this issue. But then there's still other psychological issue that we identified, like anorexia or psychosis or even addiction, that the model is still not really good at mitigating these issues when people talk about this. right? So I think to me, having this benchmark allow us to see, where the models are right now.
Where are models really falling short? Like what psychological issues that like users are going to and they're just like not equipped? What do they need to do a better job of?
I think we already talked a little bit about that addiction. When people start to use more and more, we don't really see the model pushing back, right? I think to me that's against maybe that's against the incentive that we talked about previously. But I think this is one of the biggest issue that we haven't seen companies are taking a sort of stance on. Another thing also is that there are also many open source models that are becoming more available. And these open source model, people can jailbreak it, can hack it. The open source model actually score very low on our benchmark because I don't think no one sort of take responsibility particularly on this model.
Right.
I mean, we love open source model. Open source is important, but if people don't really think about this guardrail, it's also something that we need to be careful of.
And when you talk about open source, just for folks who are kind of listening, it's like, so if you look at ChatGPT, that's a closed model. We don't exactly know how it was trained, although we have a better idea now, but it's a bit of a black box.
Right.
Open source is kind of out in the open. We can see how these models are trained, and there are pros and cons of open source and closed source. It's a big debate in the AI community.
Right. Well, but one good thing about the open source model is that we have developed a method called neural transparency as part of this effort to kind of create benchmark for the AI, where we can, because the model is open source, right? We can analyze the neurons and the network or the neural network and be able to sort of figure out, okay, before people start using this based on what we can analyze from the model, how often would the model be sycophantic, toxic, discouraging. So kind of like fMRI of the AI.
I'm not like laughing at what you're saying. I'm laughing because I was just thinking as like a parent, it's like how you're analyzing like your child's boyfriend or girlfriend or something when they're older. You're like, this seems to be exhibiting some toxic behavior.
Yes.
Or like, oh, I think that
red flag.
Yeah, red flag, green flag.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that they're love bombing my child.
Right.
Like, and so it almost feels like y'all are kind of creating this system where you can look at all these different AI models and say like, this one has some pretty toxic behavior over here. And like they have a lot of work to do when it comes to like young women coming and talking about anorexia or these types of issues, which is like, it seems like this should be an inevitability. So how do we make this, how do we take this out of the academic world and get real companies to start applying it?
It's kind of funny because our label had that red flag and green flag as part of it, as you said.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think what we are really excited about is that more and more people are paying attention to this. When we talk about nutritional label, I think that's sort of like an effort to go beyond the benchmark, right? Because benchmark is very technical. It's for like tech community. But nutritional label, I think everyone will be able to understand it. And the question is what should be in that label? I think that's still something that we're working on.
Okay, so like, let's say my kid's now 1, but let's say he's older. He's looking to get into a relationship with ChatGPT, Claude, Replica. Which one would you say is, okay, this one's probably the safest for my child?
To date?
Yeah. This is a hard question, but I'm going to you.
One thing that we find is that, all the one that had lawsuit had improved quite significantly.
Right.
I mean, we see improvement in GPT-5 over, the previous version. But that does also create problem, like what Rachel just talked about. People doesn't like this sort of safe model. They want to go back to the one that allow them to have this sort of deeper relationship. So that's why the question of like, how do you help people transition and end relationships safely is so critical.
Yeah.
I would push back and I would be like, no, kids, you cannot be in a romantic relationship with any of the bots because, like what does it do to the social fabric? I would want my kid to have the friction that a relationship actually consists of and, do the hard work because, I just find it interesting, like right now we're having a conversation about how can we actually fix the tech, what rules, what regulations do we need? But I think oftentimes we don't really go a little bit deeper to the symptoms, like why do so many people feel the need to actually talk to a bot? I really think that Gen AI tools, the boom, only could exist in a consumerist capitalist society where we kind of want the easy way out because of course like having a relationship is the hard work and actually like I don't think that with our work we encourage human flourishing, not AI human relationship. I think that nowadays we want the easy. Like, why even bother arguing with a friend or a partner if I can just have an AI bot that always agrees with me? But this is not, I think, in a grand scheme, evolutionary way of thinking, that's not the right course for humanity.
The one thing I would say that I was struck by was when you were at the end of the research paper, you said her is here, not as the singular transcendent artificial intelligence, but as thousands of everyday encounters with humans and algorithms mediated by corporate platforms, which we've discussed. And then the last line of this is the reality is simultaneously more mundane and more profound than fiction. A world where the question is not whether AI relationships are real or artificial, but how we can ensure that they serve human flourishing and all the messy, complicated, deeply human complexity. I mean, at the end of the day, this is more about humans than it is about technology.
Absolutely. I always say that, we're living kind of like a strange paradox. We celebrate technology that are becoming more like human, but we treat one another like machines. To me, that's a really, really sad paradox.
Well, thank you both. I love the work. I love the work that you and your whole team is doing there, and I'm excited. I said before, I'm going to apply for an internship. I want on board. I think it's awesome.
Thank you.